So, Coach, obviously, hectic year last season. A little bit of time to kind of reflect on it all and get ready for the next one. How are your thoughts on the room right now, keeping a lot of guys and kind of retooling for this upcoming season?
Yeah, having that continuity is a great feeling. You know, as a coach going into spring ball, some of these guys, it's their third time in this system, their third, spring in this system. So, pretty optimistic, just from a cornerback standpoint, just have a lot of continuity in the room. We got one or two new guys in the fold now, so just kind of getting those guys, trains on the track is the goal.
How's that been, getting new guys on the track so far, getting people up to speed and kind of figuring out how your new group's going to kind of gel together?
Yeah, it's a lot smoother transition than when we first got here because we can kind of pinpoint the caliber of student athletes, the type of humans that we want in that room. So I feel like with Nyland Green and with Joseph Smith, who actually was committed to us for almost 2 years, it's a lot of familiarity in that room. Those guys aren't unfamiliar with our process. And for Nyland, for example, he's a guy that's been in, this is his third Division I, Power 5, Power 4 program. So this is a guy that's, has a lot of experience. We lost one guy, last year, so to bring a guy that has that type of experience kind of elevates the room because, ideally we should have a senior in this program. So that was the thought process of bringing Nyland on board.
Where's the biggest strides you've seen Keith have from where he is today to where he first got here?
I mean, he's a unbelievable kid. He holds himself to a high standard. He's a big critic of himself. He's just very detailed. We've had a lot of time to kind of dive into, some self-scout of last year, some things we did good, some things we didn't do so good at. So, with Keith going back and diving into the film from this year, he just got more technical. He was very sound towards the latter end of the season. And, with Javen and Keith kind of under the squat rack, they had to man a lot of snaps, this previous season. So, just having those guys self-critique themselves. Keith is real big on just being detailed for the amount of snaps that he's out there. If he's out there 80 snaps versus 50 snaps, he doesn't want to give things up from a technical standpoint.
What's that next step for Keith?
The next step for Keith Abney is really just from a production standpoint. This is a guy that knows our system in and out. He just has to put it all out on the field. He aspires to be an all-conference caliber player. And that's kind of been the message between myself and D-Walk is there's no room for error. That is your goals, and that's what you want to achieve. So, it's really just going to come down to production. It's going to come down to whether or not you're winning your targets. And, that happens on Saturdays.
What do you think about the recruiting class you guys put together this offseason out of high school and transfer? Do you feel like you got a couple guys that none of the schools were looking at as much?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like college football is more kind of, it's a lot of parity from an evaluation standpoint. It's a lot of kids that are going to get a lot of clout in the recruiting process, but there's some kind of diamonds in the rough that we feel great about from a football standpoint, that now some of those guys are here. We get to see those guys move around. We get to see these guys in mat drills. So we're pleased with the caliber of guys that are just here right now as early enrollees, with more guys coming into the fold, majors.
What's the most important thing for you guys in this evaluation?
For me, you got to be tough. You got to be competitive. It's a non-negotiable. I can't put that in you. You got to come to Arizona State already tough and competitive. From a technique standpoint, we can kind of polish guys up, but the stamp that I want to have in our room as cornerbacks is we want to be a tough, competitive group that's smart, that's scrappy, that's going to be technical every Saturday, every opportunity we get.
How do you evaluate that level of toughness and competitiveness? A lot of times, every guy you're going to recruit is going to say, "Yeah, I'm tough. Yeah, I'm competitive. I can push myself, whatever."
Yeah, it has to jump off the film. It has to jump. Like when I watch your film, I should be able to tell if you're tough and whether or not you're competitive. When they give us these flights and these rental cars to go see these kids, I feel like when you pat them down, when you get to have a connection with them in person, you can kind of, gauge whether this kid is tough, whether this kid is competitive based on questions that I may ask, for the most part, the film is going to kind of give you those questions answered, and then it's the in-person eval as far as his demeanor, what his coach says, what do people around him say, as far as really measuring how competitive the kid is.
Some of those younger corners that you guys have, Rodney Raymond, Johnson, Tony Lewis, and Kuba, what are you looking to see from them in this game?
Yeah, I want those guys to contribute in some form or fashion. If it's not in the cornerback room, it needs to be, with Coach Regal. So getting those guys to want to be a contributor to the team is important. You know, with Chris Johnson and Tony getting here at 17 years old last year it was hard for those guys. But now these guys are first, ideally these guys now should just be entering into college. So Tony's 192 pounds, Chris Johnson's 193 pounds, and both of those guys have a lot more room to grow and to develop and to blossom. So for those guys to have 4 years, in the chamber right now, I'm super excited, super optimistic for those guys. Chris Johnson had moved to free safety, so he'll kind of start off, behind Xavier and Alfred. But, we knew that coming in and recruiting those guys, that they had position flexibility. So really pleased with their physical development with Coach Conley being a year now in our program.
What have you noticed about the perception has changed in the recruiting around?
I feel like last year being able to play in the Big 12 definitely created a lot of visibility for us, in probably the country's most potent regions in that Southeast, especially us making the playoffs. We got an opportunity to cast our net a little bit out wide. We played the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, so a lot of kids on that side of the United States are more hip to Arizona State. Even the recruits that we interact with, now it's a lot broader than when we first got here. We kind of first got out here and kind of did a little bit locally out west, and then we got into Texas. Now, I believe, across the country, there are people that are going to look our way. They're going to inquire if we show and express interest. Those guys have been receptive towards us.
Do you feel like it's easier for you, being somebody that's from that Southeast Houston area, that's able to kind of help and recruit guys that are more from the East Coast or from the South, those regions?
Yeah, absolutely. I view that it takes one kid to become 13 kids. All it takes is 2 kids from Georgia, and now you look up in 4 years, you got 8 kids on your roster from Georgia. So I feel like, a lot of it is based on who's on your roster. Like, it might be a kid in Connecticut that she grew up a cold, hard Steelers fan, and her grandson plays wide receiver. That gives us an opportunity to feel like there's some variables that we can connect to feel like we got a boxer's chance versus, a kid that has no tie to Arizona whatsoever. In that case, we would want a kid to at least come out here on his own dime, express that interest, show us that it's real for us to allocate resources to recruit those guys. So I just feel like right now we have a huge following in Texas. A lot of Texas kids are appealing towards Arizona State. And even better, when a kid comes on campus, I might be hanging out with Keith Avenue. I might be hanging out with Xavier and Alfred. I might be hanging out with a kid that's from my city, from my town, against a team that I played with. So the validity of Texas to Tempe is not only real from a marketing standpoint, but every coach, especially starting in 2026, will have a player in his room from the state of Texas. So what bigger selling point than that?
What have you noticed about the change about when you approach a recruit or hire some caliber recruit now as opposed to before?
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on what Coach Dillingham says. Like, we're not going to chase you. We're not going to convince you. We're not going to try to get you to the altar to commit to Arizona State. We want you to not be able to sleep at night because you want to join our family. We want you to be convicted. Recruiting is a lot like dating. I can't show you all of this love and you don't show me love at all. So if I express interest towards you, you got to reciprocate that. I got to feel that as well. Otherwise, transfer portal. It's always going to go that way. So it's like, I recruit a little bit aggressive, but at the same time, I'm not going to chase you down. I'm not going to send you good morning text if I'm not getting anything in return, if it's not reciprocated.
What can Cannon Siegel do to help your room?
Cannon Siegel is a guy that's, not new to our system as well. He's a guy that is very experienced in how we do things. He's an up-and-coming guy. For him to be this young and be a part and to be so a part of our process at such a young age, that's going to benefit him, long-term. And we always talk about, these coaching fraternities and coaching trees. That's a guy that you look up in 8 years, he might be a DC, he might be a head coach, so always, like that kind of dynamic of an up-and-comer, being able to be around, our staff, which I feel we have a great staff. So he has a lot of people that he can learn from that kind of quickens him in his profession.
What sort of things are you trying to work with him on, kind of at the ground floor, to help him make those first steps?
Yeah, I don't even feel like he's at the ground floor. I just feel like now is more kind of jumping into the cornerback role instead of kind of dealing with the fronts or dealing with the linebackers. So this is a guy that's not a novice by any means to Coach Ward's system. So I feel like this is an unbelievable opportunity for him to kind of transition from a student to put his train on the coaching tracks.
What can a guy like Plaz Johnson do this spring?
Yeah, Plaz is an exceptional athlete. You know, I feel like, we knew coming in that Plaz was kind of green to cornerbacks, being that he was a receiver by trade coming up in high school. But, I mean, it's a guy that's probably the most exceptional athlete in that room. It's a guy that plays with his hair on fire. It's a guy that has a lot of passion and a lot of drive for this game. I think the sky's the limit for Plaz Johnson. For him to go what he went through last year and still have 4 years of eligibility, makes me and Coach Walker very excited about that kid's future. So just him being able to be serviceable, understand the toolbox attached to our cover 3 package, cover 4 package, man package, whatever it may be, just making sure that he's fluent in the defense will be a goal not only for Plaz, but for all the other youth in that room as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.